Welcome back to the final episode of Learning Blender, and today we are going to be rendering your animation. So what we're going to be doing is go ahead and go to the camera view, and this is a pretty good camera view. The default camera view is pretty good for me, but if you want to change the camera view, first off make sure that your auto keying is off because that can mess you up, and just go to lock camera to view, and then you can kind of look around. But I'm just going to keep it like this because it's the only stuff that you can see is the kind of the ground here. You can't see outside because everything you can see is going to be inside of this box right here. So this is going to work pretty nicely. And I'm going to change this light to a sun lamp and just go ahead and take the power down to 7. And I'm just going to swap into Eevee for some pretty quick kind of viewing and everything. But if you want to do everything in Eevee because you have your computer may be a little on the weaker side when it comes to hardware and stuff, you can just go ahead and turn on ambient occlusion, which is basically give you some better shadows. The screen space reflections is going to give you better reflections. And now that I'm seeing that, I think it might be a little too metallic. So I'm just going to bring the metallicness up a little. Let me go ahead and exit out of this view mode just real quick and open the preview. Let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. Basically for a shiny looking robot. Okay, that looks good. So basically that's kind of all the settings that you'll need. Let me turn up the subsurf. It's way too much subsurf on the sphere. So let me just kind of bring it down just a tad. And then go into the shading and just, yeah, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to keep it at that. So basically what you're doing, if you're going to be rendering with a weaker graphics card or CPU or PC or laptop, then you can run Eevee. But if you have a decent computer, I would highly recommend Cycles. It is a kind of a photorealistic kind of render engine, and I'm just going to bring up the metallic on this. Go ahead and bring down the color, and here we go. So what I'm going to do is go over to Edit, Preferences, and you're going to require, you need to have the latest version of Blender for this part right here to understand everything I am going to be saying mostly. So basically what you have here for your cycles rendering or render devices, you have CUDA, Optics, and OpenCL. If you have a Blender supported GPU, then you can either go to CUDA or Optics, and you can just select your GPU and your CPU if you need that kind of extra boost for rendering. Now note, rendering with your CPU as well is not always faster, but if you have a RTX NVIDIA graphics card, then definitely go over and select Optics, and basically this is for me, this is the fastest way for me to render in Cycles because it basically takes full advantage of the ray tracing capability of the RTX graphic cards. And so if you have a RTX graphics card, then go to Optics and select that. If you don't, make sure that your graphics card is in CUDA. And if it's not in CUDA, then go ahead and look for OpenCL graphics cards. And if you don't see anything there, then your computer doesn't have a graphics card, and try to go ahead and render with your CPU, and hopefully your CPU is enough so that it can render. But for me, I'm going to be using the optics with my RTX graphics card for fast rendering. So basically, once you have that set up, you can go over here and turn on adaptive sampling, and what that basically does is it kind of helps with denoising. Now, if you have a NVIDIA graphics card, you can turn on optics AI accelerated viewport denoising. A bunch of big words to basically say it takes this kind of grainy mix, this with all this kind of spots of grain and everything, and it just smooths it out. And don't worry if you don't have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can still use denoising by just going over here to the layer properties and just going and press denoising, and then just go down here. And if you do have a NVIDIA graphics card with ray tracing, go ahead and turn on the optics AI accelerated, so that way you have faster denoising. But if you don't, that's okay. You uh, you can just keep it off. But basically that should be good for now. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go here. Actually, I'm going to go over to here, have a new folder, and I'm just going to call this photos, or if you don't want to get that confused for something, I'm going to call it Blender Frames. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the file format on PNG, go over here, go to desktop, and look until you find Blender Frames or whatever you named it, and accept that as the output area, the output for your PC. So now that that is set up, basically, yeah, that's all set up. So it's going to have all of the outputs and it's going to basically have all of the frames and put them into the Blender Frames folder we created. So basically the end of my animation is at about 120 frames, so I'm going to set that at the end frame, and I'm basically going to go over to compositing. I'm going to press use nodes. I'm going to add in a glare node, and I'm just going to leave that be for now. We'll see what that's going to do. And I'm just going to press render and render a single image. So basically that's going to render, and it's probably going to take longer depending on your computer setup. So basically what you can do now is go over to compositing here in Blender, and you might want to add in a viewer node and just basically take the image of your glare and put it to your viewer node. That way in the background you can see, okay, here is basically everything that we are seeing. Also, if you were to have this right here, you can go ahead and see, oh, I see the glare and everything. But I'm just going to push that off to the side for now. And I don't like the streaks. I'm going to go for the fog glow effect instead. And that looks pretty good. You probably can't see anything, but it's kind of one of those hidden details that really add onto the finished product. So I'm going to keep it like this. And if this looks good and everything, you could use all these different kind of like the star streaks, or you can use the normal streaks, or you could just go ahead and go for the fog glow. That's what I'm going to do, but that should be good for now. So what I'm going to do is I can just delete the viewer node. We don't need it or anything. But then we're going to go back you can go to layout or really anything. But basically, what we're going to do is press the render and render animation. So I'm just going to probably render out 2 or 3 frames to explain to you what's going to happen. But basically, what we're going to be doing is we're going to basically, I say basically a lot, we're going to have the set of all the frames and we're going to use Blender to composite them together. And the reason why I did this instead of it rendering out as a JPEG, I think that's what it's called, instead of having it render out as a AVI JPEG, yeah, I'm just going to render out in separate images because that's basically how I found to be the easiest way to render it for compositing, so you can add in those extra post-processing things like the glare. But basically, this is looking good. I'm just going to press the X arrow because I don't need to render out the entire animation, but if you're rendering this at home, you might want to go ahead and render out the entire animation. But I don't need to, so I'm going to go over to, remember, I'm just going to press General, and let me see what it was. I forget what it is. The compositor? No. The video sequencer. Okay, so press this on the top left and go to video sequencer. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to add an image sequence, and we're going to take that folder and press A to select all and just add in the image strip. So if you were, oh, hang on, it's not on frame 1. This can be pretty bad if you have audio or something, but if you don't, it's not really much a big deal. You're probably going to miss a frame, but make sure you're set to frame 1 when you add in the image strip. But if you are not on frame 1 when you add in the image strip, you can just, move it side to side by a couple frames, but that's pretty good. So if you render the entire thing out, then it would go from point A all the way to the end at point B, but we don't really need to, for the sake of the tutorial, I don't really need to render out all of it. So I just render out a few frames. So go ahead and if you were like me, just wanted to render a few frames quickly just to see if it works, then you can just go ahead and take it so your end frame is all the way here. So basically now what we can do is I'm going to go here on the file format and I'm just going to go FFmpeg video, and then you have all these crazy options, but you don't have to worry about it. Just press this right here and just do H.264 in MP4. So now you can export as MP4, and if you were to add, let's say, some sound to it, then you would just go over to the audio and just set it as MP3, and that's basically your general kind of video format. But now that that's all set up, we're going to go here, and I'm going to go ahead and just keep this and accept it as it is. I don't need to set the finished product at another file, but if you were to do this and you have a designated renders file for your computer, then you could accept that as your kind of you could use this as where you want the video to be outputted, but I'm just going to set it here because I have very few frames. I can easily tell where the video is going to be. So basically now what we have to do is go over to render and render the animation again. But this is different. It's basically taking all the frames and kind of putting them together into a video. I only had 10 frames. It's now done. So if I exit out of here, go over here, open this, you can see I'm on Windows, so it gives me this nice kind of icon. and it's very short because I only rendered 10 frames, but you can see it's working now. So the robot's going to drive forward and pick up the sphere, but yeah, that's all I'm going to do for now, for time's sake. Kind of give you an idea of how it all works. But yeah, now you know how to make videos in Blender, how to make images in Blender, how to add very, very simple object rigs, and basically basic 3D modeling, and now you're ready for the more complicated stuff, so you can go out on YouTube and look at all of the more complicated tutorials. But that's all, and I really hope you enjoyed this series, but that's going to be all for the series, and I really hope that you guys are going to continue to work on Blender. Have a good one.